Hey, welcome everybody to the Black Flag Coalition podcast. My name's Dane. This is Jesse. We're going to be going over various topics over multiple episodes. Today we're going to be starting with kind of the basics of what anarchism is, what the state is, things like agorism and all that, just kind of fundamentals of what this whole philosophy is about, and kind of clearing out some of the misconceptions and all that that are kind of been betrayed through the media by the government over the years through, basically propaganda and slander. So anyway, getting it started off is basically just getting into what is anarchism, what is the definition, what is the idea behind it, and it goes back to anarchos, actually, from ancient Greek. We got the etymology here. Oh, now you got to do a screen share. But yeah, Jesse, did you want to go ahead and
I'll
start
bring
that
up.
off?
Let's see, not that one, that one. Yeah.
So I got the screen share up right now with. Let's see. There's the etymology of anarchism. Or anarchy.
So goes back to Greek and without Greek, which is archos, chief or ruler. And as you go on, that just comes to mean no ruler. It means without rulers, without a king, without your emperor, without your divine being sent to earth to tell you what to do, whatever you want to call it. It's actually pretty straightforward. So I'm not really sure what else to say about it other than it just simply means without rulers. And a lot of people mistake that to mean without rules because they hear ruler and they think of a ruler, they think of government, they think of rules and laws, and they automatically assume, well, that means that there's no rules or laws. And that's just, in my opinion, it's fundamentally ignorant to think that.
Right, and a big part of that is that there are general, natural laws or just unavoidable rules of life. As far as if I walk down the street and just start punching random people in the face, odds are that's going to be bad for myself. What's best for my self-interest and my self-preservation. At some point, someone's going to attack me back or just flat out kill me. So when people think, without formal law and in the sense of written law by government. What ends up happening is they just assume that means just chaos and disorder. No, there are things about life that you cannot possibly change. You don't work, you don't eat, generally speaking. Things of that nature. You have to still keep in mind the element of human nature, and that often gets thrown out the window. People think that human nature is somehow synonymous or symbiotic with government and the state. So
right. And I mean, anytime someone brings that up, whenever they say, well, without the government, without rulers, without leaders, without this or that, we're not going to have any law, it's just going to be chaos. And I like to point out to them the theory of spontaneous order, which essentially says that in any given system of existence, natural existence, in any given system, when there is no external controls placed on that system, it will, of its own volition, order itself in the way that is best suited, most efficient, most effective, etc. And you see that everywhere. You see it in everything. You see it when you're driving down the road and there's no cops there to make everyone obey. Yeah, you got a couple of assholes there doing 90. You might have someone cut someone else off, but overall, people do things in an ordered way that is the best for them and everyone else.
Right, and you and I both have been to a lot of different countries, a lot of different places in the world, and I'm not sure if you've been to any, but I've been to countries where I doubt they even had a single stoplight in the entire country, yet somehow people on bicycles, mopeds, cars,
right,
golf cart type looking little tuk-tuks.
Anything they can get to move. Anything they can get to move and carry shit with them.
And it's not even like a traffic circle or anything like a roundabout. It's just it's a four-way stop, and people just kind of go, and then the other, the other direction goes, and it just kind of works itself out.
Right.
It's spontaneous order. There's no, or you look at places like, what was it, Denmark, I think, where you look at the port there, and it's just one of the most insanely busy ports that you've ever seen.
Right.
Yet all these mariners going in and out, thousands and thousands every day. They go without hitting each other and sinking and all
Right.
that. They make it work.
If you're going to bring, and I know you were in the Coast Guard, so you probably know more about, maritime history, law, and all that shit. Before government ever got involved in trying to regulate the way things were done on the seas and even in the bays and the ports, the people that went out there, the sailors, the ship captains, they all codified how to do this, and then government came along and took that codified, those codes and those agreements that were had completely on their own and said, all right, we're going to use this and say this is the way it is.
Right. They basically formalized it, and that's the same idea as any law. Formal law as far as government issued, black and white on paper law. The whole reason that started is because at a certain point, very early on in society, people began to go, okay, there are certain things that are morally right or wrong or bad. It's wrong to rape, it's wrong to murder, it's wrong to steal, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And there were things that you don't need a written law to tell you that these things are bad. Mm-hmm. That was the common thought, the common mentality towards those types of acts, acts of aggression. And there wasn't any need for a written law. Everybody just knew it. It was natural law. Like if I hit you, or I came at you with a sword or a spear or a gun or whatever it was, if I aggressively assault you, odds are you're going to fight back, or your buddies are going to show up and they're going to jump me, or your family, or whatever. It's actions and consequences. There's repercussions, good or bad, for every action.
Right.
Don't need formal law.
Right. I mean, and just to beat a dead horse, to continue making it more apparent that laws are nothing more than the formal codification of what most people already know and want to subscribe to. If you look at something as recent as the FFA or FAA and the flight regulations, again, the original pilots didn't have some oversight agency saying this is how you have to do things, and if you don't do it, you're going to get fined and you're going to get your license. There wasn't any of that. It was just people going out there, and granted, accidents happen, people crash, this and that. But
ultimately, that doesn't happen with government in existence.
Right.
Still crash accidents.
Tell me one thing you think will happen without laws that doesn't happen with them. It happens either way. But you look at it, and you look at those sky captains, I guess you could call them, and say they figured out that there were certain ways to do things. You needed to alert other people into your presence. You needed to know how to deal with if someone was in your flight line, or whatever. I'm not a pilot. I don't know dick about it, other than originally there was no FFA or FAA, and people still somehow flew planes and didn't wreck into each other all day.
Right, and it goes to the entire idea that morality in its truest, purest sense, and it sounds almost a little bit cynical, but morality in its purest sense is based on self-interest and self-preservation. Yeah. The idea
I
that
don't want to be raped.
If we're both flying planes, neither of us want to crash.
Right. Or I don't want to be raped. I don't want my wife to be raped. I don't want my daughter to be raped. I don't want my mother to be raped. And that's kind of where it forms the basis in every person's mind. What I wouldn't want done to me and mine, maybe I shouldn't do to others.
The golden rule that every society and every religion has ever been built upon. Do unto others.
Right. So, I mean, it's obvious when you look at the natural world, which I love the arrogance that a lot of humanity has about us in the natural world. They act as if we're somehow separate from it. The only thing that separates us from the natural world that we can possibly conceive actually does separate us, we have higher cognitive function. We're able to perceive and to classify and to categorize and to apply a sense of ethics or morals to the world around us. You know,
Right.
what is immoral or moral to us isn't anything to the natural world, you know. To us, death is bad, but to the natural world, death is a part of life. It's what it is. And we think we're above it somehow. We think that somehow we can make the world better than what nature has already determined is best, and that is balance and, you know, spontaneous order and the freedom to act as you're going to act, but the responsibility, the burden of the reactions that will occur as a result of your action.
Right, and you even find that, because a lot of times people will try and attribute humanistic traits to and other animal species, and depending on the cognitive function, and cognitive level of whatever animal it is. But again, it just goes back to the whole idea of morality being based on self-preservation. If it's conscious, if it's sentient, it wants to live. Like
Right.
that's the driving force of nature, is to, go forth and reproduce. You want to
Survive, thrive, and, you know, multiply.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's where a lot of the times we end up attributing humanistic qualities and traits and things like that to
Right.
other animal species, is because of that level of self-preservation. I want to eat. I want a comfortable place to live. I want security. Those are the three basic survival necessities for any sentient being.
If you could go ahead and repeat those three things, because funny thing about them, go ahead and what were the three things that everything wants?
So security, sustenance, and shelter.
And shelter. The funniest thing about that is, at least today, you know, it's a new thing for the government, but I find it funny. Those are the three things that all beings that exist want: somewhere they can lay their head down. They want to be able to lay their head down securely without being eaten or killed or whatever, and they want to be able to eat so that they can go about their life. Those are the three fundamental things that you almost always hear government saying it needs to fix. We need to fix the homeless problem. Well, yeah, but people can do that, you know, but government always wants to point to the homeless and say there's so many homeless, you know, and it's especially on the liberal side of politics that they bring that up, or the food thing, you know, people need to eat. And in the security thing, which is primarily a conservative end of the spectrum or the neoconservative end of the spectrum, they tend to beat on that. We need more security. We need more security. You know, I just find it funny that the three basic things that all entities, all beings want, are the three things that government is most often trying to get involved in. You know, I don't want to go too far into
most
that,
often
but
fucking up,
right.
honestly.
But, oh, we're going to make you more secure. Well, tell me how many terrorists the TSA has caught. You know, tell me. I mean, not to knock the military service too much. I mean, I will as much as I like, just because I've been in it. But how many terrorists has the Coast Guard or have any military operations within and even without the U.S. really dealt with? You know, supposedly we got Osama, supposedly we captured this guy or that guy, but I mean, of all the terrorist threat that's supposed to be out there, how many have we really supposedly captured?
Yeah, it's like that image that's been floating around on the internet for a while of, like, you know, I've seen far more police execution videos than ISIS execution videos this year. So
you were 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than you are to be killed by a terrorist. It might be, but last I checked, it was around 8 times. I mean, that's crazy. You're more scared of some guy with a machete in a desert than you are of the guy down the street roaming around with, you know, entire belt full of ways to kill you.
Right, and when you break it down, I mean, you know, when you look at the definition of terrorism, it's the use of violence or intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. The highest political aim there is the creation and enforcement of law. It doesn't matter if it's Sharia law, it doesn't matter if it's democratic law, it doesn't matter if it's the monarchy or communist or anything like that.
Let's just call it what it is. It's to achieve control. I mean,
exactly.
The highest political aim is to control.
Exactly. So if you're using violence and intimidation and extortion and throwing people in cages to, and in a lot of cases, they are, quote unquote, victimless crimes or, non-violent crimes, which if you look at the legal definition of what a crime is, it requires an injured party.
The constitutional definition, the lawful definition, the legal definition.
Right.
Right, yeah. I don't know how much you know about that. Lawful and legal are two different things. Lawful is based on constitutionality. Legal is some jackass in some robe at some point said this is how it is.
Right.
And
the idea being that, like, and when I say injured party, again, I'm talking in legalese, not the medical definition of what an injury is.
A right has been trespassed, your property has been somehow diminished, you have somehow been harmed.
Damaged or stolen property, someone used a aggression in some manner against you, whether it was rape or, assault or murder or anything like that. Like, and again, that goes back to the whole idea of, like, you don't need a law to tell you that a crime has been committed. Crime exists with or without a formal law.
Right.
And then you look at, for example, police versus security guards. Security guards don't enforce law. They're hired to protect property or individuals or, whatever the case may be.
Right.
That's it. If anything, they end up calling government in the long run, to sort out whatever situation is involved. But the security guards themselves don't actually enforce law. That's like a bouncer.
I'll say yes and no today. I've been a bouncer, and I've also done private law enforcement or private security, whatever you want to call it. It really depends on the venue you're in. Yeah, a bouncer is just there to basically, if the owner wants you out, you're out. If they don't want, they want you to ID people, make sure there's no bar fights, stuff like that. Just in general, they're actually protecting people to a degree. They're protecting the owner's interests as much as they're protecting the patron's interests. But when you get into private security, yeah, for the most part, they're there to enforce the policies of the client. If you're doing ID checks at the door, then you're there to make sure no unauthorized persons come in, that no one violates policy and procedure while they're on the property, to be a professional witness in the event of a crime occurring, things of that nature. There was I did security for the Metrolink here in St. Louis. It's a metro train. I don't know what you guys would have similar to that. It's an above ground subway.
We have metro here.
Yeah. So I did security on those, and yeah, anytime there was an incident that I dealt with, I did have to call police. But guess who dealt with the incident? Was it me or the police? It was me. I dealt with it. So I actually have some respect for security in regards to they're actually on the ground doing shit.
I prefer private security.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But the police just there and come up to mop up. I can't tell you how many times I've had police show up and the guy's in cuffs laying on the ground, and I'm like, there's your cargo. That's your job. Pick up my cargo. But yeah, that is essentially, you're right to a degree. They do also enforce laws to a degree, but
that's usually under a basically like you're a private contractor to government in that case.
Right.
You're actually, like, yes, you are a private contractor. You're not a government official, but you're being contracted out by a government company for whatever it is. Like, I think once you actually start enforcing law, you actually have to basically be working for government.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to make sure, because I don't want to disparage against security professionals that are like, I do enforce law. Yeah, you guys do, don't get me wrong. If a guy comes onto your property and starts beating on one of the people there, absolutely you're going to go in and stop the assault.
Right.
Or you should, at least.
And the thing is that when I say that I'm anti-cop, I'm not saying that I'm anti-security by any means. Like, and that's a really big misconception. It's something that people who are very patriotic tend to have a big sore point on, is when you start saying, no, I don't support the troops. And they're like, well, why not? And it's like, well, first let's start off with the fact that, yes, I am a veteran, as are you. It's like you took part in the war on terror. I took part the whole war on drugs and a little bit on the war on terror, but you know, I was mostly on the war on drugs side of things.
Right.
And it's like, and now we're both making the argument that it's horseshit,
Right.
flat out. You know, which should send up a red flag to your average patriotic American and all that. And it's like, look, I'm not against the American people.
Right.
I'm not. I mean, they're my kinsmen. You know, like whether or not government exists, they're the people who live in my society. So saying that I'm against the government and what they do and all that stuff and disagreeing with it doesn't mean that I'm by any means against the American people. I want the best for them. And I just think that the argument for anarchism is one to be made.
Right.
You know, because the whole thing is, it's like, you know, people talk about, oh, America is built on, you know, the idea of freedom and, you know, and all that. Well, I'm making the argument that anarchism and freedom are synonymous, and that everything, like anything less than that, is a gradient level of slavery. You know, it's a gradient level of servitude. You know, from libertarianism and minarchism, where it's just a really, really small form of government. You know, theoretically. All the way to full-blown totalitarianism and, you know, all that. You know, anything less than anarchism basically isn't freedom. Right. You know, it's levels of gray, basically, is what it breaks down
right.
to.
All right. Well, I think we're getting a little sidetracked because we wanted to, you know, get into all the law stuff. But, yeah, I mean, speaking of, you know, like we said, anarchy is essentially without rulers, and it has nothing to do with laws or rules. You know, society operates on laws and rules regardless of whether the government is there. That's evident just about anywhere you look. People bring up Somalia and say, if you want anarchy, go there. Well, you know what? That's not anarchy either. They have a government. And it's warlords, I should say. Guys trying to get political power in Somalia fighting each other for it. It's still governments fighting each other, you know, and they still have rules and laws. And even if it were anarchy, you look at the Somalian pirates. If anarchy or no rulers means no laws or rules, why aren't they, you know, killing each other off to the point where there are none left? Right. You know, Somalian pirates, I won't say that they never turn on each other. I'm sure they do, because they tend to be cutthroat. But, sorry, smoker's cough. But at the end of the day, when they're on task, when they're out there pirating, they're not turned on each other. They're working as a cohesive unit. And you see that all through nature, and you see it all through society. When you take government out of the equation, even if it's only in the physical sense, meaning there's not a cop on the road as you're driving down it, or there's not a cop at the store to make sure that you're not shortchanging your customers or whatever, you know, anarchy persists throughout all of it. It's not that anarchy doesn't already exist. It's that government has laid itself upon anarchy and then said, now there's no anarchy. We're in charge keeping things orderly. Well, it's not really true. But speaking of all that, you know, you get into all that, and then people like to bring up my most abhorred, you know, idea ever, and that is the social contract. Right. So I think we wanted to touch on that while we were talking about all the basics of this. You know, what is the social contract? What is a contract? And what the hell does it mean to have a social contract?
Right. And that whole thing is what really bothers me. This is argument that I will always make against a social contract is, when did you sign it?
Yeah.
Flat out, when did you sign the social contract?
When did you sign it? When did you consent to it? When did someone come to you and say, do you agree to this?
Right. And the thing is that from the moment you're born, you come into this world, they slap you with a birth certificate and a social security number. And it's a system that's based on assumed authority and just kind of this inherent, like, right to lord over you and conscript you and all that. And it's, the thing is that that's not a valid contract. When you sign a contract, you're 18 years of age, and the reason being that you need to be able to think critically. You need to be able to have reading comprehension to read what it is that you're signing your name on and go, yes, I agree to this, or no, I do not. And the thing is that the social contract, it's applied to you, you're conscripted to it,
Right.
because you were born a geographical location that's between two arbitrary lines.
Right. If I can be a narcissist for a second, I actually have one of my favorite ways to put it whenever someone brings up, well, you consented to it by being here, da da da, and I'm going to go ahead and show you an idea of what I tend to tell them about this. If I can get over here. The fact that my parents and yours had unprotected sex and that we were expelled from our mothers 9 months later is not consent of the government on our parts, and it doesn't lend any validity to the claims of authority over us. And it's the same for the social contract. And to put it crassly, just because your parents fucked and you were born on a patch of dirt that someone says is under the jurisdiction of some, shadowy, smoky, vaguely defined group of fucking people does not mean they have any say over your fucking life. That's not consent. That's enslavement to say you were born here, so now you have to abide by my rules. But it's certainly not consent. And I wanted to point, because the social contract, the idea of it just pisses me off so much, that because I was born not of my own will, suddenly I'm beholden to this set of rules, to this agreement, to this obligation. And I'm sorry, no, I'm not.
What's even more screwed up is that with the way things are set up now, you're born with a slice of the national debt on top of it. You're basically, when you're born and they give you that social security number, they take that birth certificate, the government takes that birth certificate and sells it to the Federal Reserve and they use it as a bond, basically, or like a credit chip. And they go, okay, when this bond matures, in essence, when this person becomes of age, being 18, they're going to be a productive member of society and pay their taxes and pay off their slice of this debt-based currency that we're going to create. And then they create what I think is like $50,000 worth of currency on your behalf, and they throw it into the economy. I mean, this is part of how the whole debt-based system works.
I think I did something wrong here. Damn it.
Anyway, I kind of getting off topic there. But,
right.
It does kind of link into the idea of the social contract and taxation and central banking controlling the wealth and all that. And it's a lot to cover, but the thing is that it does all tie into, itself. So,
yeah, just to make that point real quick. So far, all of us have an interest of $940 into the national debt. Just those of us existing. That's not saying that that necessarily means that's how much we're going to end up paying, but yeah. I think that math works out. I don't know. I don't know how to do anything. Oh, jump more than 300 billion. That makes more sense. 17 trillion. I put the wrong number in. So if it was
it's way more than that.
So Thursday, we all got indebted $1,000 extra grand. Everyone knows an extra grand as of Thursday. So there you go. Sorry, my point was a little bit moot, but I fixed it. So think about that. In one day, we all became in debt by $1,000 in one day.
Just because.
Thank you, government. Thank you. Appreciate that. All because of this thing right fucking here. The social contract that we're all somehow obligated to be a part of this. Yeah.
Isn't that grand?
It's wonderful. It is a grand. But yeah, so the social contract per Google. I know Google isn't a super high profile. It's not Harvard. Whatever. Google tends to get it halfway right most of the time. An implicit agreement among members of society to cooperate for social benefits. That's what we're told what it is. All right? And keep in mind, an implicit agreement. If you go into a court of law with a contract and say implicit agreement, the judge is going to tell you to shut the fuck up. There's no
Right.
such thing as implicit agreement. Any ambiguity in a contract favors the signer, not the draftee, not the drafter, not the
Right.
person who drafts it. So society can suck it. If it's implied, that's in my favor. That means the whole thing is null and void. The ambiguity puts it in my favor rather than society's. All right, and it became popular. Not that it was thought of then, but it became popular in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. So we're talking the 1500s is when it started getting popularity. So we could safely say it likely came to rise around the 1400s, and it was a means of explaining the origin of government and the obligations of subjects. Now think about that. It was a means of explaining the obligations of the subject. It's basically nothing more than a theory to say, hey, you're ours, and this is what you're obligated to do, and if you want to be a good citizen, then you need to abide by the social contract. A good citizen, a subject, all right? You're a subject. Get the fuck over it. You're not a free man. You're a subject, all right? The social contract has nothing to do with your freedom. It has everything to do with your duty as a subject, as a slave, as a serf, all right? So, I mean, that's just getting that. And I mean, that feeds into, where did I put it? The Magna Carta, I think I have over here. The Magna Carta, which came out in 1215, so about 200 years, 300 years before the social contract. But this was, in my opinion, one of the beginnings of the social contract. And a lot of people, especially constitutionalists, like to bring this up and say this is the basis upon which we placed the Constitution. The idea behind this, we're told, is to alleviate the tyranny of the king over his subjects. That's what we're told this is for. But what it actually is a bunch of rich guys that got tired of the king taking their shit, and they said, look, if you don't stop fucking with us, we're going to amass armies and kill you. So agree to this or we're attacking. It wasn't anything to do with the people. It had everything to do with land barons and lords and nobles and the wealthy saying, we're tired of you taking our stuff, so we have more money than you, so either you agree to this or we're going to attack and take over. And which feeds into the Constitution, which was, again, a small group of people with a claim and reputation and money saying, we're tired of the king taking our shit, so you need to stop this. And then saying it was for the rest of us.
Right.
But last I checked, I don't know if it's going to show it here. Maybe I need to find the actual... Let me see if I can find the actual image. No, I don't want to download shit. All right, well, where is it?
People like to make the argument of like, oh, you know, we rebelled against the king and blah blah blah, and you know, that's how we won our freedom. And it's like, yeah, all right. And then George Washington turned around and killed Americans over a 25% whiskey tax. Like,
Right. Oh my God.
you rebelled over a 3% tea tax, and then Washington killed people over a 25% whiskey tax. Your argument is moot.
Here's one of the points I want to make about the Constitution. People say that was for the people and by the people and of the people and all this people shit. How many signatures you see there? You think that's enough for 13 colonies or however many colonies? It was 13, right? Pretty sure I know my history well. I studied it long enough. So 13 colonies, that's all 13 colonies right there apparently. This is 13 colonies worth of signatures and sent.
I wonder how many people at that time could even read that damn thing.
Right. You know, understand it. I mean, we are very well educated compared to them. I wouldn't say we're smarter necessarily, but we're definitely educated enough to be able to break this down and understand it. Back then, literacy rates, not that great. So they basically wrote this huge thing, said, this is for you, and the illiterate population said, oh, thank you.
Right. And even on top of that, who could read it, more or less, who could understand it if someone else read it aloud to them? With the wording that's in there, you think any of those friggin' corn farmers or, you know, cow herds would have understood a damn thing in that?
Right. I mean, they weren't dumb by any means. It was a sore lack of education. Education had not begun really for the mass of the population, and it wasn't government that began it. And we'll get into that, I'm sure, some point in the future. But before anyone even says it, no, it wasn't our public education system that fixed that. Not even slightly. Look at Abe Lincoln, not part of the public education system. Henry Ford, not part of the public education system. Bill Gates in this day and age defied it. He dropped out. So success isn't based on public education whatsoever. But yeah, so yeah, speaking of the social contract, it's this implied contract, which means the whole thing is ambiguous, which means right then and there, per contract law, it's BS. It's
Well, as far as its validity as a contract, can you go back to it real quick? You saw the image.
The Constitution.
Constitution. There we go. Yeah. So, as a contract, strictly speaking, it only applied to those people who signed it.
Sure.
That's it. And then it became a null and void contract once the last person that signed it died.
Right.
That contract died with them.
I mean, you can see here, that's the last page. This is a government site, so hopefully they're not censoring any further pages where every person born since then has signed. I mean, did you sign this? I didn't sign it. I don't,
I didn't sign it when I was a day-old infant.
I don't think I did either, so. But I mean, yeah, so let's get into it. And just for those that don't know, yes, the Constitution is a contract. It is a contract supposedly people in the government agreement. Any sort of dictated, compromise or agreement is a contract. And we can see that when we go and just look at the basic definition of contract. Written or spoken agreement, usually concerning employment, sales, tenancy, intended to be enforceable by law. Enter into a formal or legally binding agreement. The Constitution is a contract. It's a contract between the now instituted government and the people that have consented to it. It's an agreement. So if it's an agreement, why don't we look and see what the law says that a contract is, And here we see it, and I'm not going to try to break it all down, but it's an agreement with specific terms between two or more persons or entities, like government and you, or government and Monsanto, or government and anything that exists that is an entity.
Or between you and I.
Right. In which there's a promise to do something in return for a valuable benefit. Constitution, all right, in return for giving us security and ensuring our freedoms from, tyranny and foreign invasion and this and that and the other. In return for that, we will, I don't even know. I can't even think right now because I'm so pissed off. Just talking about this makes me so mad. Anyway, the agreement is basically the government provides security and we essentially provide ourselves to that end.
Yeah. Our the things that we produce or the profits from those things.
Right, which is when you get into taxation.
Via taxation. We get extorted whether we want to or not. From everything we buy or sell or anything like that. Honestly, if you want to really get along in today's society, a lot of the times people think, okay, you got to go and get a business license, you got to get a tax ID, and if you hire anybody, they need to sign a W-2 or a W-4 or W-9 or whatever the hell, whatever tax ID forms, and then when you get paid, it's not even like when you get taxes taken out of your paycheck, it's not even like you're saying yes to it, and when you actually say yes to it is when you sign that tax form, that W-2 or that W-9, because your employer, it's like this downhill.
It's trickle down.
It starts with the business owner itself.
Well, it's a trickle down law, legislation, whatever you want to call it, is kind of how I look at it, because what it is you, by law, you are not required to fill out that paperwork by law. There's no law that says you have to fill out a W-2 that you do. There is a law that says an employer has to have you fill it out, and thus the employer has a rule that you must fill it out. You're not required by law. They're required by law to collect it. So, yeah, technically speaking, in a manner of speaking, it's voluntary for you to sign that, but not really, because you can't get the job. The employer has to have it, otherwise they can't hire you. So, I mean, go into an employer and get hired and then say, well, I don't want to sign this. Well, then we can't give you the job because by law we have to have it. It's a backdoor way of doing that, because and they've admitted it multiple times, taxes are technically voluntary because there is no actual law to compel you to pay them, but there are laws to compel other entities to compel you to put yourself in that system.
Exactly.
Or else you go without.
If you choose to run a business, you have to make the conscious decision of, am I going to go about it in a manner where I'm not getting a business license, I'm not getting a tax ID, I'm not paying taxes on anything,
right.
Things of that nature, which actually kind of brings us to the next topic, which was agorism, which is kind of the practical application, or not kind of, it is the practical application of anarchism in a modern society. And it comes down to that whole choice of, am I going to choose to run my business in a manner where I'm paying taxes and I'm willing to force the people I choose to hire, I'm choosing to basically take a cut of whatever they make and hand it over to the government.
Right.
Or are you willing to, if you're a general contractor and you hire a, day laborer from outside of Home Depot or something like that, or from Craigslist, right. And, it's just a cash exchange between two individuals.
Right.
Technically, that's black market economics. That's agorism.
Right. And I mean, we'll get into that more. I think we're slated to talk a little bit more about what the different flavors of anarchism today are. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, agorism is very much about contracts in terms of agreements, but it's about contracts outside of what is considered to be legal or legitimate. But yeah, just a contract is basically the most layman's term way I could put it is that a contract is an agreement. It's an agreement in which both parties say they will do this, or they will do that, they will offer this, they will offer that, and that if one party or the other, fails to abide by the contract, then there are usually penalties of some sort, whether that be loss of services, loss of money, right. Loss of this or that.
Or the contract's just outright rendered null and void.
Right, exactly. And then you've got reputation concerns if you give a damn about reputation, but whatever. A contract is an agreement, the end. That's all it is. So, when you get into the social contract, it's an agreement, but it's an implied agreement. It's implied. It's implicit. It is not,
right. Which is not valid for a contract.
Right. For a contract, well, it's not valid. And that would be like me going to you and saying, hey, so do you mind, doing me a favor? And you say, what is it? And I'm like, well, just whatever I might need. Whatever I might decide fits into it. It's ambiguous. Right. And that's kind of what the social contract is, because nobody really agrees upon what the terms of that contract are. Some people say, well, the terms of the social contract is that we all put in money to provide for security and to make sure that there's no corruption going on in the business world and this and that, and that's the end of it for them. And then other people want to say, well, no, it's also we got to feed the hungry and shelter the homeless, and that's part of the social contract. So the very fact that there's so many debates about what it is just goes to prove its non-existence.
Well, and the thing is it gets down to talking about what your rights are. And if you look at what a right is, it's basically a guarantee. The government's guaranteeing you something.
Right.
And I think it's been pretty well established in this day and age that doesn't happen.
Right. They have violated the terms of the contract.
Yeah, I know my rights, whatever, as the cop beats you over the head.
Right. And it's important to note, guarantee is not give, it is not... it doesn't mean it's theirs to give you. It doesn't mean that they grant it to you. Guarantee is that they will not infringe it. They will not take it. They will not restrict it from you. They will not revoke it. A guarantee is just basically a way of saying it's yours. The end. They guarantee your rights, or they're supposed to.
Right.
They're not supposed to infringe upon your rights. They're supposed to make sure no one else infringes upon your rights. And that's where they tend to loophole it in. Well, we want to make sure no one else is going to infringe on your rights, right. So we need to infringe on yours just a little bit.
Right. It's like that whole circular reasoning of people are bad, and they might use violence against each other. So
Right.
government's going to use violence against people to make sure that there's no violence against people. Like what?
And speaking of circular logic, we were trying to find the etymology of government. And that speaking of circular logic and just a huge masturbatory thing, here we have, as soon as I start the screen share, here is the etymology of government. And if you read this, you'll notice it really never defines itself beyond government. It says government is basically what this is saying. It doesn't provide you with a clear description or basis other than control, direction, or administration. That is as close to a definition that it'll give you.
It just uses itself to define itself,
right.
Which is like definition no one. Like you don't do that.
It's like saying this man is not a liar, for he told me he is not a liar.
Right.
Well, is that? I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't believe him, but is there any other evidence? Is that the only evidence? Is that he said he's not a liar? Well, government is government because it says it is government. That's what this is. There's no real etymology. It's just government is control. It's direction. It's administration. Yeah. To govern is to control. Now, a lot of people want to say that there's a I don't want to call it a myth, a theory that government means to control the mind. I've seen that going around, and I wouldn't disagree with it, at least not in practice today.
Right, and words evolve and all that.
Now, whether or not that is actually the etymology, well, as you can see here from online etymology, which you would think would try to have some semblance of reputation to be taken seriously. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about mind, but it really doesn't tell you where it comes from either. And if you Google the etymology of government, I think I've got it here. Here's what Google gives you. Again, governor, government, govern, government. That's the etymology. There's your etymology. That's the background. It comes from governor. Well, what the fuck? Are you serious? I mean, I guess I could try. Let me try governor. Let's see where that comes from. All right. Gubernator, or however you say that. I don't know. I'm not fucking Latin. Right back to it. It's just you keep going back, and all you find is it's government because it's government because it's government.
Go to etymology and type in governor and see what they come up with.
All right, yeah, that's fair. Let's try them. How do you spell that again? I forgot. That's not right, is it? Ah, crap! I forgot how to spell it. I don't think I know how to spell it anymore. I just spelled it over here, didn't I? No. I'm retarded. Well, there goes all of our credibility. I can't even spell shit. OR just does not look right to me. Alright. So governor. It comes from governor. Or goinar, or however you say that. I don't know. Personal keeper, protector, guide. Now that's interesting. Alright, a personal keeper, protector, or guide.
One who governs a ruler.
Right. Okay. Wait a minute. So governor is the person that governs a ruler who is in charge of government, which is it's a circle jerk. It's a huge fucking circle jerk, and everyone's reaching around to the next guy.
It just basically boils down to you listen to me because I said so.
Right. I mean, I'm no entomologist, but I would imagine if an entomologist saw a word that was this absolutely self-fulfilling, he would say it's a nothing word. It means nothing. It comes from nothing. It's just a word someone came up with to convince you that
it's because I say so.
Right. It's fiat. It's a fiat word. It means what it means because it means what it means.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love circular reasoning.
There's just, like I said, we tried looking for it. We can't find any real etymology, any real background where it comes from, other than it comes from itself somehow. So government is self-perpetuating, according to its etymology. But we can get into the definition, which, again, check this out. How often do you see a definition in which they use a form of the very word you're trying to define it?
You're not supposed to do that.
You're not supposed to do that.
That's something that Webster's it would have like a shit fit
The
over.
governing body of a nation. The relation between a governed and a governing word. Well, okay, that one has to do with grammar. But it's still funny that they can't find...
Wait. On that one right there. if it comes from ruler, so the relation between the ruler and the ruled.
Well, this is a grammatical use of it right here.
Right, but
But yeah.
if we replace it with the root word being ruler or rule or ruled, so it's,
Aye. There you go. Thank you, Webster. They gave a much better. See, tell me Google's not, sleeping with the state just a little bit. I mean, come on. Government is a governing body. Come on, dude. You can't do better than that. You give us Merriam-Webster, and you can't even come up with better. Good job, Google. Anyway, the group of people who control and make decisions for a country, state, etc. A particular system used for controlling a state. And, I mean, here you go. Controlling. It's the best way I can put it is everything points to government is control. I mean, whether or not it means controlling the mind or not is irrelevant. All right? Do you consider yourself a red-blooded free American? Well, if you like government, I'd have to disagree, because everything about the very word government means the exact opposite of being free. It means being controlled. If you support government, you support control. A controlling party, whether it be 1 or a billion, it's still a controlling party.
And that's one of those sore subjects, it's, when you're talking to someone who is, again, very patriotic and all that kind of stuff, you get this really thick layer of cognitive dissonance just from a lifetime of being indoctrinated to it.
Right.
And
I mean, when you talk to most anyone about this kind of stuff that hasn't done their share of independent thinking and searching and researching, you always hit a wall with them, and as soon as you hit that wall is when the insults and the rage start. And the reason for that isn't because they're just tired of it and they're just mad at you. It's because they have nothing more to it. When you get to the foundation of their belief systems when it comes to government, you find out it's not there. There is no foundation. There is no real basis for supporting it other than because they've been told to their whole lives.
Yeah, no one likes finding out they've been lied to or that they've been had,
Right.
It's not a good feeling in any circumstance, and I get it.
Not at all.
It's an abrupt awakening, and
I was pissed
Yeah,
when I figured this stuff out.
It's almost insulting in a way, and so I get why people get really mad about it. I totally understand. I was there myself at one point in time a little bit. It was, I think, the most nationalistic or statist that I've ever been was really libertarian. I was anarchist-minded my whole life, really. And then when I was in the Coast Guard, that was really my attempted fitting into society and
I did it for
the American way and all of that, and even then I was still very libertarian about things. I didn't like the idea of big government, and there were things that I took part in while I was in the Coast Guard, which, was part of the Department of Homeland Security. There are things that I took part in that it didn't sit right with me.
Right. So you were talking about your time in the Coast Guard and the things that you had done that you really didn't approve of, or at least you were saying there were things you had been involved in that you later or at the time weren't comfortable with.
It just didn't sit right.
Huh?
It just didn't sit right.
Right. And I mean, I completely get that. So that I don't digress, I won't get into it, but yeah, I mean, I think anyone that served in the military and has gone back and looked at it, even if they still are a proponent of the state, there are things that they look at, and I think you'd be hard-pressed not to regret some things. You'd have to be a sociopath or a psychopath to look back at your entire military career even if you weren't combat, and say, there weren't some things I wish I hadn't done or hadn't been involved in.
There were some orders that didn't sit right for whatever reason.
I mean, unless you're Chris Kyle.
Yeah.
Chris Kyle, maybe he can feel good about the things he did. I certainly don't think that he should, or is he still alive? It doesn't matter. So anyway, but yeah, I think we're gonna probably try to wrap this up. We've been going for about over an hour. Post edit, I'm not even sure we can get us down to an hour, but it's it just comes down to the state, is all based off of this implicit idea that we all are obligated to one another and to, to all work together under these flags that they've made for us and are flying. And it just, when you get down to it, it's all based on these assumptions and presumptions and implications, and you're raised to believe this. It isn't something you come to terms
and
with.
Implied consent.
Right. It's something you're told your whole life, and so you accept it by the time you could think about it.
Right.
And I mean, if it was right when you did think about it, that'd be fine and well. But the truth is, a lot of people that do start thinking about it, they realize it's not right. There's something inherently wrong with that whole system. And I think that's what we're trying to get at. Next week, I think we'll be getting more into like the meat and bones of what anarchy is and isn't, or more specifically what it is, really. And I think we're going to bring up the history of empires, because I don't think it's too much to say that we live in an empirical state here in the U.S.
Right. And something I learned early on, like through my studies in political science and philosophy, and it's pretty much philosophy 101. All systems fail. At some point in time, all systems fail.
Absolutely.
That's
I mean, it's the same in history. Historically, there's not a single man-made system that continues forever. There's not.
System. Or natural system, for that matter. At some point, the sun's going to die out and the Earth's going to be a cold rock floating through space. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
At some point, all systems fail.
Right, and in the natural world, those systems usually convert to another system. They become part of something else. And I mean, that's the nature of the beast. But yeah, we'll touch on some history, which I'll have fun with, because that's kind of my meat and potatoes. I love history. History is the thing that probably freed me the most, was understanding and seeing history. I'll save that for next time. We'll probably bring up democracy and voting, because that is a huge point of contention between statists and anarchists, and even anarchists and other anarchists. What democracy is, what voting is, and what it implies. Right. And then, like I said, we're going to get into the real meat and bones. What is anarchy? Who are anarchists? What are the different kinds of groups and, flavors and whatever of anarchy? And we're going to break all that.
Touch on why none of the, no true Scotsman arguments from either side are really valid. In all honesty.
I have a feeling I'm going to get pissed off in the next episode too. That's all I'm saying. I can feel it already. I'm already getting pissed off thinking about it. Yeah. There's a lot of that going on. It's horrible. So yeah, we'll probably end it here, and we'll start up again on the next episode. So yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
So and then also, if anyone watching has any sort of questions, comments, social or economic issues that they want to bring up, that you already kind of have a question about how something would work, or how could this possibly exist without the state, or whatever it may be. We'll address questions and comments at the end of each segment. We don't have any yet. Obviously, it's the first episode. So, tell us what you think. Any questions you got, let us know. And we will talk to you next time. Thanks.